Before we start the episode, a quick note. BioBlueprint was created with a simple goal: to bring together the leaders shaping the future of CDMOs and CROs and capture the conversations that really move our industry forward. Every episode is about sharing real insight, real experiences, and lessons that the next generation of leaders can learn from. If you enjoy these conversations and want to see more of them, the best way you can support the podcast is by following and subscribing. It helps us keep growing this community and continue bringing you thoughtful, value-driven discussions with people building the future of our industry. Thanks for being a part of it, and now let's get to the episode.
Hans Christian, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for doing this. There is loads to uncover, loads to unpack. You guys have been on an amazing journey for the last several years, and we'll get into all of that. So first and foremost, really appreciate you coming on the BioBlueprint podcast. The first question that I would like to ask you is, how do you describe 1023 Health in one sentence?
Right. So first and foremost, thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure and looking forward to the conversation myself. And one sentence is going to be a tough call. So I would probably say 1023 is a human-centric, sustainability-focused contract development and manufacturing organization for the development, manufacturing, and testing of sterile injectable medicines. Long sentence, though.
The thing that stands out to me from that answer is the human-centric part. What does that mean?
Basically it means and can mean a lot of things. And even before we created the company name and our company values and things like that, actually the thing on my mind when starting the journey of the business was really patients, people, and planet as kind of a focus of this company, which basically is still basically the three commitments of our organization. And when you look at that, human centricity can actually touch the different elements of patients, people, and planet, which means that basically, our focus is to deliver effective and quality medicines to our customers, which could be pharma companies or biotech startups. We have to make sure that they have basically medicines in hand that will help their patients. So that's one element, and that's a key part of our mission, basically, is to really make sure that our customers' patients get what they need in time and quality to really tackle their diseases and or symptoms. Secondly, I think it's a question of how you operate that. So it looks into the inside of us as employees of these organizations, is how we interact with each other, how we work. It's basically a key focus of our organization. Then thirdly, it's probably, for example, when you look at, again, in the people fragment, it's really about making sure how do you impact society, how do you impact the families of our employees, like the regions where we have sites in. And if you want to zoom out, and that's maybe also on the planet side, is how we operate, is how does that negatively, but also maybe positively impact the planet from the modus operandi, and how do we impact, the world around us in the broader sense when it comes to, economical sustainability, that biodiversity impact and things like that. So it probably has a different shade coming back to the patient, people, planet side.
Awesome. So you have these three pillars, the three Ps. Let's put it that way, which is patients, people, and planet. So those are the three, I guess, markers or pillars in what 1023 stands for as a business. Let me ask you this question: what made you want to build the organization in the first place? So you have all of these impacts and things that you're currently doing, and that's amazing. But why did you start the business in the first place?
Yeah, so I'm as a profession, I'm a pharmacist. So started to work in pharmaceutical industry early on, worked at a variety of at a few companies, and I was always in the sterile injectable business, so that was very topic-wise, it's very, very close to home. And one thing I noticed when I also worked in the prior company is that when we work with external vendors, contract development and manufacturing organizations, they were often good in executing, but exactly for what we told them. So when something really didn't go according to plan, and I can tell you R&D is never according plan. Then basically we almost had to send in like a massive team of experts, development people, MSAT people to our CDMOs to really tell them exactly what to do. And I always was hoping for finding an expertise in a CDMO where we can like talk at the same kind of expertise level, where a CDMO would make me suggestions. They said, oh my gosh, look, we found your antibody product is showing aggregation, and here's my suggestion for you. You can change your formulation. This is what you can do, or let's focus on the process unit operation. So it's finding someone from an expertise level, and that was one huge motivator for me to start a CDMO where we can provide that expertise that basically is similar to like when you look at larger pharmaceutical corporations to be able to talk at eye level with our customers when it comes to the science and the knowledge. Secondly, it was really about being able to do things differently. And that's where our tagline at 1023 comes into play. Standardized solutions built differently. It's also where we're trying to do things differently because they can be done differently. And it can be technical solution, again, like providing opportunities and technical outcomes for customers that may not have existed today. One example here is to be able to deliver product in larger volumes, like 10 milliliters subcutaneously. I mean, probably a few years ago, people were dreaming about this, and clinical people like medical doctors would be not wanting to do that because they would be scared to actually do that. But the point is, why not? And if the medicine requires that and you need to dose like 2 grams of antibodies, it's a very safe and convenient way to do that. So trying to extend the boundaries of what is possible in medical treatment, that's a huge opportunity that I see. Thinking differently about solutions to be provided. Plus, basically, and I mentioned the modus operandi that we have, like how we organize, what the expectations are on team members, to also, think differently about it and not just copy, paste, and emulate what maybe McKinsey taught people in 1965. I think we moved on in the world since then, at least that's my hope. And, we moved away from conveyor belts, like, for example, work that requires performance reviews that are counting the number of units that you constructed on the conveyor belt into a different kind of world where we are, creating things. We're working with computers. We're working wherever we are, and it's a different work environment. So it's also thinking differently about the organization that really needs to enable that kind of approach. And last but not least, it's about doing things from a sustainability perspective that also when I started even, and when I worked in prior companies, people said, we are pharma, it's good enough to make medicine, so let's worry about CO2 later and biodiversity impact. It's very far away from us. It's not, because the pharmaceutical sector is really a huge, very relevant sector when it comes to impact on sustainability, adverse impact. So my hope was that we can do things differently, and by doing things differently, maybe also try to steer the pot a little bit on bending, expanding the space on what people see is possible.
Fantastic. So I really appreciate everything that you've just highlighted there. So as you said, obviously you're a pharmacist, by trade, and you worked in, let's say, the pharma side of the world first. And in that time period, as you say, you realized CDMOs were really good at executing things that you told them to do. But when it came to R&D, it almost never goes to plan. And in order to then send your own team to, deliver on those promises and on the project and all of that, that's the gap that was identified, hence obviously launching 1023 Health. And all of that makes clear sense. Like you say, doing solutions differently, thinking outside of the box, not copying and pasting the previous methods or the previous blueprint.
Exactly.
It's about thinking differently and having a different organization. And obviously the sustainability part, as you highlighted there at the last point, we'll discuss this later in the discussion. And it's actually really interesting from my perspective. So you don't hear many pharma or CDMO companies have this as I guess, at the top of their priority list. But like you say, it should be there from day one, which is exactly what you've done. So exactly. I really appreciate all of that. As a business though, 1023 is still fairly young, but it's scaled rapidly. So what about that journey for you has been the most surprising?
The most surprising, and I agree. So we are entering our basically fifth year now. So we'll be celebrating our fifth anniversary at the end of this year, and it's interesting because basically from an idea and like a couple of scribblings on a napkin, basically scaling to an organization. We are around about 280 people now across the two locations that we're having, and I think the most surprising is probably, I would say. Maybe that's a good one. At the beginning, we started the business and then we made a quick, acquisition for the sterile facility and the first line that actually came into 1023 to make sure that we can really, kind of jumpstart the business from a manufacturing standpoint as well. And we were in the process of integrating, contracts and everything. And it was interesting because from the organization that we acquired, employee contracts were, for example, like 40-page documents, very extensive, like a lot of legal language, and we cut it down to a 2-pager. And we also invited like everyone from that organization to work in a trusted work time environment. So we cut the time recording of a 41-hour week to a 40-hour commitment based on trusted work time. And my surprise in that was that we had a lot of like questions and vetoes from the team at the time who said, well, I don't want trusted work time. I want time recording. And I was hugely surprised because just obviously coming from my own expectations and assumptions, I love to be trusted on what I do and like to schedule my day and like, and I don't need to just batch in and batch out at kind of a machine or like online. I'm not sure I need that. And I'm definitely also think that performance and contribution to a company is not a question of time, at least not linearly. So, I mean, it's like there will be times where you will be more effective. There will be times where you will be less effective. So at the end of the day, it kind of is not only a question of work time, plus basically you want to make sure that you provide flexibility to employees where, you need to go to a medical doctor, maybe you got a physiotherapy, maybe I don't know, your kids have a theater play and you want to go there. And that's why I think it's important for a company to provide that. The response I got for why do you want time recording was I want to really be able to prove to you as an organization on how much I worked, which is exactly on that element of trying to prove to your employee or employer on the work. So it becomes probably less a question of trust rather than really trying to think in the category of time equals performance, and it requires like a proof and a validation. Just my video for a second. So it's a little bit the surprise that we had that apparently different things were important for people at the time of integration compared to my expectation of what really people expect from a flexibility in the work environment. And that's pretty okay. It just means people have different requirements, expectations, and context.
And it takes time to shift mindsets and change things, at that level, especially as you say, historically people have thought about time spent equals performance is directly correlated, but that's not necessarily the case. And that takes time to implement, that takes time for people to digest. And the terminology that you've used there is trusted work time. Is this something that is, a terminology that has been coined by 1023? Because again, like I say, for the last 10 years, I've not heard people talk about that, but that is a really refreshing thing to hear. So it's more about, we trust you to get the job done. This is the task at hand. Whatever that looks like within the 40-hour week, that's up to you as long as you deliver, rather than, let's say, for example, be in the office or the lab or whatever, 9 to 5 per week. And as long as you're there, you're performing. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, totally. So I don't know about the terminology, and I certainly don't want to claim any inventorship of that. I'm pretty sure it's somewhere around, and that's also when started the company. I love books, so I'm usually reading quite a bit. So I read quite a bit about various things, and the loop approach, reinventing organizations were really kind of fundamental books when starting the organization. Or Gary Hamel, Human-Centric is a very recommended read, and there's a lot of interesting concepts out there. And even if you look at larger organizations like Bayer and pharma, who are trying to basically move more responsibility in the organization with they call it dynamic shared ownership model. I mean, these things basically exist, so we don't want to claim that there's any invention here. And to me, it's about making sure you provide flexibility and at the same time, obviously, I think that element of trust comes really into play because, and that was maybe also a surprise, or maybe it shouldn't be a surprise, is obviously there's always people who will try to misuse the system. So you'll probably have the occasional person who will try actually to misuse the system and maybe rather spend time doing nothing than time, on a program or project or deliverable in the sense of a work context. And that is also has been, I've been having quite a number of sad moments over the course of the 5-year journeys too, where seeing people misusing the system, I constantly just keep asking myself is how much control do you want to implement for a whole organization, given that maybe you have the 1 in 200 people that has been misusing the system. So at the end of the day, I do believe that you need to provide good rules, frameworks, and I think it's good to have a boundary versus no boundary. At the same time, also making sure that you provide, the flexibility. And if you don't trust the people that you're hiring, why did you hire them in the first place?
Simple as that.
No, it is very simple at the end of the day. And the challenge with trust, obviously, it's easily lost too. So I mean, it's also something to make sure that you are always in a good exchange mode, and to be mindful about the trust that you are given in the context of an organization. And I could also say, in the context of a leader of this organization, I'm thankful and appreciate the trust that investors give to me and a board gives to me and things like that. And I think it's a question about how you run an organization on the outset. I think it should be more based on open communication and trust rather than just trying to implement control mechanisms for everything and everyone.
This is a really refreshing thing to hear, and it's like it's not just forward thinking, as you say, in terms of your background, the fact that you like reading a lot is something that you do quite a lot of time, and you're implementing this sort of way of working. It has its cons, it has its pros, and all of that. But for someone like me, it's a refreshing thing to hear. Yes, there might be 1 out of 200 who abuses the system and breaks that trust, but that's people and that's part of the process. But the large majority obviously now have adjusted or have appreciated the way which you guys have tried to build this organization.
And I think it's a journey, it's a journey too. And I think you said it as a reflection of my last response also. It takes time to, to reflect that and, maybe to change past habits as well. So it's a question about maybe unlearning some of the principles that you've been trained in a prior job, in a prior context, etc., where, I don't know, maybe where you are in town halls and no one would ever ask a question to like a department head because, what they experienced before. So and people come with, everyone comes with their baggage and luggage, and you have to make sure that you can just invite into basically being part of the journey. And I think it's a journey, and we could see that for individuals and individual teams in the organization. I think they're also at different stops of the journey. So if you think of the journey as being like climbing the Matterhorn mountain, being in Switzerland, it's like people will be at different locations at the mountain, right? And like some are still at the base camp, and that's totally okay because maybe they've been just leaving a completely traumatizing experience from a prior job or what have you. And so I think I think its summary is it's a journey.
Yeah, I love that. It's a process, it's the journey, as you say. So on the back of all of that, would I be right in saying, people are encouraged not just to think outside of the norm or the box, but to question and not just take things for as they are? Doesn't matter if you're a department head, doesn't matter if you're a junior scientist who's joined. That is something that's encouraged from day one at 1023. Is that a right thing to say?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm doing onboarding meetings with every person joining too, to get to know like everyone joining the organization, and for them to get to know me a little bit better, because it's also a question. I mean, no one would talk to me if they don't know who I am, right? And so that's where one of the things that I keep saying to everyone is that, you're here to ask questions and challenge things for us to become better. And that is true for like a sterile production operator. This is true for anyone who comes into, I don't know, the sustainability team. And if any of your colleagues would tell you this is how we do things here and shut up, it's the wrong response, and don't be silent. And if you can't handle the situation, I mean, go make yourself heard. You're invited to call me as well. And it's like it's an ongoing journey. And I mean, it's also important in a company that is also, you know, we are manufacturing medicines, and you need that to have that, you know, psychological safety and quality mindset and attitude in order to be on the journey for continuous improvement. And also for operators who join us from maybe different sectors and stuff, I tell them, like, look, every syringe that you're producing here could be the syringe that is saving your kid's life if you have kids, or could be saving your mom's or your dad's life. So every syringe, every product that we make has a name. And if you had any doubt about this, any doubt about the quality, or someone told you to, you know, do something that comes in with data integrity and work ethics as well, it's like, don't be silent. Don't ever be silent. You have to raise it. And if you think it's better to use a nail compared to, you know, a screw, go try the nail.
Wow. Okay.
I mean,
okay. You said something earlier, from an idea on a piece of paper to 280 people roughly speaking, in the team right now. And if I understood what you said just now, is when it comes to onboarding, you're introducing yourself to everyone, you're spending time with them, and the idea behind that is you know, they get to know you from day one, and they feel like they have access to you right from the start. And onboarding is such a crucial part of the piece. And the companies who do that part right tend to have talent stay with them for a long time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and I would wholeheartedly agree. And our onboarding is also, I mean, it's much more elaborate on that. And I think onboarding can be technical onboarding, right? Go read that SOP, do that task, follow your trainer, do whatever he or she does, and try to, you know, learn on that part. We also have onboardings when it comes to, you know, what are our values, how do we operate, what's our meeting structure, how do we communicate. We do nonviolent communication trainings with folks, which, I mean, for some people probably raises an eyebrow when they join us and saying, oh, I'm doing what means violent communication if this is non-violent communication, and things like that. But it's very simple things. It's like, I don't know, you're sending an email to a colleague, and he or she is not responding, and then there's one way to communicate, is like you go to his or her boss or forward them an email and saying, like, please, why is this person not responding to my email, blah, 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 go talk to him. Or you could basically, you know, pick up the phone, call the person who's not responding, saying, you know, the various steps of nonviolent communication. I see you not responding. I feel like ignored, and I feel like not respected because you haven't responded to me. It's also an important matter for me. Can you please respond to me? And maybe this other person's has like some other context for what's going on. Maybe their children are in hospital and they can't respond right now. And it's like, you know, stop this automatic escalations to someone random, like a mommy or daddy escalation kind of approach, or don't jump to conclusions in your mind and start to, you know, frame it in that kind of aspect, rather than maybe thinking about what you observe and frame it from your own perspective. What does it do to me if you don't respond to me? Or what does it do to me if I have the impression you're angry, and what does it do to me? It's a more powerful way to communicate. And it's a very simple context, but different context. And that's part of our onboarding as well. And again, it's not easy to really think through that and apply that. It's a question of time. It's a question of journey. Some people are more open. Some people use that already extensively in their own lives, like private lives out there. For some people, this is like completely new.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And sometimes emails can land worse than the intention, just because of the wording.
Totally.
And that happens across the board. And again, this is like...
And it happens with me too. I mean, that's one of my bigger derailers is too. I can be very quick, and I know my derailer is being quick, and I can send very short notes. That's why I always prefer our chat functions in the company as well compared to emails, because frankly, I want to focus on maybe just asking something rather than saying, hey, Leonard, how are you? What's going on? Hope your weekend has been fine. blah blah blah. So it becomes. I do think still that emails should be a little bit more considered like letters rather than like a chat function. And it's also you got to make sure on definitely on how the communication land. And I mean, no one is safe from continuous learning, and I mean that's an area of constant monitoring for myself as well.
Yeah, I really like this, and I truly mean this, because a lot of the network we have who's going to be viewing this are candidates who are in the CDMO, the pharma biotech space, and so it is refreshing and it is nice to hear that the onboarding piece is such a critical point. And obviously it takes time, and that's just how humans work. But to be able to walk into a business where they've thought about so many things. For you guys, it's the norm, but is that industry standard? I don't think so. But it's an amazing thing to hear, and for people watching this, I'm sure they'd really appreciate this as well. And who knows, somebody comes and joins you from this.
Yeah, happy to. We always have vacancies, so that's good.
Look, just shifting the conversation here. When it comes to the business, you guys are not trying to be the cheapest CDMO. And my question on the back of that is, what are customers really paying for when they choose 1023?
Wow. First of all, I'm intrigued by your assumption that we are not the cheapest, but okay. Maybe comes with being on Swiss grounds. Well, I think it's a question of what is the expectation, right? And what are you looking for? And what is the service that you require, where we, for example, develop formulations, produce products, or do the testing? And what is the expected quality level? What is the expected timeline? What is the expected output? And that's where I think the fundamental discussion should be on. And I mean, I've had customers calling me and saying, just run 1,000 samples on an HPLC machine, give me the chromatograms, and and that's why I would probably say, I'm not sure that it would be the best value of money if we did this and we can do this, but I mean, then you probably need to go to the cheapest labor country in the world, or like someone who's where no one is working preferably, and it's just everything is like 100% automated, and you got to make sure that it's just data points. Or maybe another customer comes in and says, well, I need a formulation for a bispecific antibody. I need it in 4 weeks. My timeline is really tight. I need to push it. I need to accelerate time to clinics and time to launch. And so my expected, or my problem is basically to have a stable formulation in that kind of time frame. And that is not a question of data points. It will be a question of expertise, knowledge, and contribution, and making space for the client in a adequate time frame and stuff like that. And I know sometimes in industry, I mean, people ask for just regular fills, and sterile facilities may be blocked for a year. And so I think it's a question of time, quality, expectation, and what the ask is. And I think we can add a lot of value where we can add value. I mean, it's like someone who comes in and saying, I got a molecule, I don't know how to dose it. I don't know the dose. I don't know what, it could be anything between 200 milligram and 2 gram. How can I give this or develop this into a product that the patient can use him or herself? And that's where we would come in and saying, okay, here are the options we see. This is the suggestion from a strategy perspective, and we can execute on that and build in all the mitigations. So it's a question of what you want and what you need from a customer perspective, and what your expectation is. Customers who want to have like an expert service for something that they will benefit from a time quality perspective, great. If someone just wants to have 5 data points of a standard method that is run by 150 CDMOs, I think they would probably just compare the price and go for the cheapest labor.
Fair answer. And I just want to clarify my assumption where that comes from. Obviously, being a Western CDMO in Switzerland, and when you think about what's happening in the market right now from a broader scope, India's massively on the rise. China is no longer, I would say, cheap labor. There's a big shift happening there. That's why there's a lot of these Indian CDMOs up and coming. And so maybe the framing of the question wasn't the right way to put it, but I think the answer that you've given is absolutely correct when it comes to time and quality, being part of that project and being there from for that biotech and for that pharma company is essentially what they are paying for, the expertise, the knowledge to get this antibody project done. That's the key thing here. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a good example. We've been producing we've been supporting a customer previously for filling a very difficult to manufacture syringe, intravitreal product, very complicated, highly demanding from a regulatory environment. And they went on to another CDMO and saying, "Oh well, we found a CDMO. They really gave us a very interesting price for batch and blah blah blah." And they called us after around about a year and saying, "Well, you know what? They couldn't get it running at all. Can you still, would you take us back, please? And we want to go to validation like PPQs in 6 weeks. Can you do this?" And I was like telling their CEO saying, "Well, if we do this, you really owe me a big favor." And I told you before that this is a very difficult to manufacture syringe, and it's good for you to have experienced it maybe firsthand in a kind of bloody nose situation where you tried it elsewhere and it didn't really work out. But yeah, and then we made it happen, and that's something I'm really proud of, is that we can get things done. And that's where I think it will be also depending on this ask for support. It will depend on the prior experience of a given customer, right? If they know how difficult the problem is to start up with. I mean, it's like I've had discussions with folks and saying, how difficult can it be to like fill a water-based product into a syringe? And it sounds very simple, but the devil will be in the detail, and some syringes and some stoppers will be very hard to fill and stopper set and stuff like that. And that's where technical expertise and knowledge really comes into play, and if someone has been experiencing that because he or she worked at, I don't know, Genentech, and they know the tips and tricks and the challenges alongside because they've experienced programs being delayed because of those things. That's a good prior knowledge to have as a customer as well, rather than thinking it's like I can go anywhere and just hope for the best. And that has been an interesting experience too. So some various customers, I mean, especially the big farmers who have the knowledge right internally, there's a great level of appreciation of the services and expertise and specialty knowledge,
along with the agility that you guys can offer for sure. Which brings us really nicely to the next question. And before I ask that was a great example that you just gave. And like you said, the devil's in the detail, the proof is in the pudding, and that is something you guys should be really proud of, and I'm sure you guys are. So when it comes to the landscape and the CDMO scene in Switzerland, where do you believe 1023 is the strongest compared with companies like Lonza, Siegfried, for example? And I feel like we've already kind of unpacked that, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
Well, first of all, it's an interesting question, and the point I would make is that I think sometimes languages can be differently precise, and these companies in English terms would be considered competitors probably to some extent. The German language would say Mitbewerber, so it's like also other parties who are part of that kind of overall market, which I really, really prefer, because I do think that, again, it's a bad word, the devil is in the detail, because those companies will probably do things slightly differently and maybe not necessarily do the same things that we do, for example. So neither the examples that you raise, and that would probably also be considering to other parties who are in the sterile fill and finish business are doing for example, filling the containers that we do with the amounts that we do, etc. So I think the offerings are in detail quite different. So that's why I also believe in the power of potential partnerships, even alongside, within the CDMO space. Secondly, I mean, it's probably, and from the first couple of questions, I probably think you got a little bit of an impression of how we operate, and that you mentioned agility too. I mean, we're a small, medium-sized enterprise. So it's all about speed. It's all about making sure, we move quickly. We are an early adopter for new technologies where, even bigger organizations on the customer side thinking about, there's a 10 milliliter cartridge, can we do a feasibility? We would have bought format parts and have already attempted to kind of manufacture it. So the idea is really usually to be an early adopter, to be agile, to be innovative, creative, solution oriented. And that's where I think we have our space there very strongly. And I don't believe in the power of differentiation by dismissal. So that's why I think every CDMO, they have their strength, they have their place, and that's great. So it should be more considered like infrastructure portfolio where customers can leverage that. And that's a little bit my take on it.
That's awesome. So the thing that really stood out to me there is, as you say, maybe the languages differ in terms of meaning. So in the English language, we would say, companies that offer similar offerings are direct competitors, whereas in the German language, it's parties that are in the same sort of area or the same thing, which is an interesting take. And so, in terms of the thing that you mentioned, you also said power in partnerships. That's something that I've seen has really risen in the last sort of 3 to 2 years. Companies are CDMOs who were once sort of competitors are now sort of coming together to really streamline, the entire sales cycle is the wrong word, the drug cycle, sorry, for customers. Why is that on the rise?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to hear that you think it's on the rise. I'm not sure it's been necessarily on the rise when I zoom out. I think there's definitely always like more reports out there. And I think the general idea is to, streamline things when, to make life simpler for a drug developing, aka sponsor and customer perspective, right? If basically you can have one party, I don't know, doing the filling, the other would do the packaging or whatever, is to make sure if the parties talk to each other, it becomes, more integrated, less transactional, and less maybe more driven by a customer to coordinate 9 parties at the end of the day. If the 9 parties know themselves, I mean, it's like at the end of the day, the ideal solution would be the customer at the end would be the bystander and just waiting for the 9 guys to complete their work streams, right? I mean, that to me should be the ideal and outcome. Having said that, I also think that sometimes some of the partnership announcements I also sometimes see with interest because I'm not necessarily sure on how that actually ties together. So I think in some cases it seems to be a little bit more a marketing message than an actual benefit, because I don't know how the actual integral technical pieces would come together into the puzzle. And maybe the puzzle is actually a good analogy, right? It's like we have all the CDMOs being a piece of the puzzle. If the puzzle fits together, it's better for them to figure it out how they fit together rather than the customer trying to fiddle it out and get it together. Having said that, I think also here the devil will be in the details, and some of that will be more functional than others. Some of that will be more maybe just a marketing statement over than the others. And I truly believe that partnerships make sense because you also need to be acknowledging that organizations will have a core and a strength. And I think the more you know your core and your strength, the more you can also appreciate someone else's strength. And you need to find the genius in someone else or some other organization and what they're really good at versus what you are good at. So if you're a drug substance company doing mammalian drug substance, you're good at fermentation and purification. Hopefully that's at least should be the core of your business, right? And when you then work with other organizations, you probably need someone who's really good at formulation development because it's not your core strength. And maybe as a drug substance company, you are forced to do formulations, but maybe it's not your core strength. So maybe work with a partner who's really good at it or being able to fill it. And us being a sterile product partner for, development, manufacturing, and testing, I think it would be kind of awkward if we would develop now a cell line or a fermentation process. So I think you need to make sure that these things, tie together and you start to appreciate everyone's expertise in that chain, which also requires a little bit of humbleness probably from the respective teams, management and business teams and technical teams saying, this is something we are really good at, and this is maybe something where someone else is much better.
Okay, understood. From our research, I don't know if this is the right thing to say, but from the research we've done, the focus for 1023 Health is on small batches, complex drugs, and higher value products. Is that the case? And why is that an attractive niche?
Yeah. So first of all, complex products, I would probably say we can do, for example, cartridges, syringes, anything from like a 1 ml standard syringe to a complicated custom built 10 milliliter cartridge. And so absolutely we can do things that others can't, which doesn't mean that we can not do the standards. So because that's required from building optionality from, for example, a device workstream. I think as a product development person, I want customers to think simple and then think more complicated. Secondly is Yes, we can do small batches, for example, and this is for both for clinical and commercial. So we are producing commercial batches, as few as a few thousand samples, commercial product in a batch, and that is pretty small, a batch size, which I think goes in line with patient segmentation, patient stratifications. So batches on the planet are getting smaller. So the times of one drug for everyone kind of is thankfully over. So that makes a great deal of sense. Having said that, for example, we are in the completion of the qualification of our new filling lines right now in FISP as well. So not being afraid of scale. So whilst we can do batches of 4,000, we can also do batches of 100 or 150,000 units, which you could argue, is that small or large? I would probably still argue it's medium sized. It's not in the range of, doing millions of units, like probably what was required during a, COVID pandemic in a short frame of time, or maybe what is being considered elsewhere. So I think it's important to acknowledge that batches are getting smaller, and we want to make sure we can do things there that other players who would prefer, like, give me the biggest product, I wouldn't touch it if it's less than 5 million units a year, kind of. That's where we definitely can help. Plus, basically, also when you said, that a little bit on the complicated. And I think the third thing you said was, so complicated dosage forms. It was and high value products you mentioned as well. Yes and no. I mean, we also have small molecules, injectables that we're supporting also commercially. If you, for example, think that biologics would be more higher value than small molecules, we can do that. Having said that, also, if you have more complicated, for example, drug device combination product solutions that require like these complicated or more complex dosage forms, and the device already is a component, that would be obviously with our device partners, that would add the cost of goods for a little bit of money. I mean, these products definitely then make sense to be more, on the high importance and high relevance perspective compared to maybe ibuprofen that would be in a tablet, which is probably a penny kind of article these days. So, I mean, typically these are really drugs that are impacting quality of life, life-saving, need to be administered at home, are required by not everyone in the world, but basically patient stratification as that, and yeah, and that's why I do think we can play a good role, but providing also scalability, translatability, and making sure that the product meets the market requirements.
Awesome. We said earlier we're going to come back to the sustainability part, so let's discuss that. You're one of the first B Corp certified pharma CDMO businesses. So just on the back of that, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Why does that matter? And when it comes to customers, do they care about sustainability when they choose a CDMO, or is quality still one of the most important things that matters?
Well, first of all, thank you for recognizing us as a B Corp CDMO. It's sadly, when we mention this, many of our customers on the pharma side don't know what B Corp is. That's where I think the challenge starts, and that's where I'm usually very sad about it, because, and then start with reference to Patagonia and Ben and Jerry's and go read upon it. I've had customer discussions where we presented our sustainable development goal, like priorities, SDGs, and I've had customers ask me, what does SDGs mean? And so I think the general knowledge about some fundamental aspects of sustainability are probably not on everyone's mind. It's probably fair to say, and it depends a little bit on the person you're meeting. And a lot of folks nowadays obviously have more appreciation and attention to that, especially when you're maybe motivated doing that in your private life, and you think through that maybe from your own footprint, etc. And so I would say variable, and I would also add maybe we're not doing this for the sake of being the differentiator as being selected as a CDMO because of our I think customers do choose us because of what we can do and because of what we can bring to the table, and not just because we can do that in a sustainable way. And we do it because it's the right thing to do, and not because I believe it will attract 2% more customers. So we will definitely, and I think linking back to our discussion earlier, I think we want to do that because it's the right thing to do it. And it's a little bit going back to really the the DNA of the organization. We want to make sure that we can move the needle and do things that maybe hasn't been considered. And really, the B Corp environment and interaction with B Corp has been really helpful to think abroad that. And I give you a little bit of examples as well. And we are just about to publish our 2025 report from a sustainability perspective. We are doing voluntary reporting because CSRD requirements wouldn't apply to us on European reporting. We do that. We've been implementing things that are way outside of CO2 discussions. I mean, we are doing composting for organic waste. I mean, how many pharma companies or CDMOs do you know that have a compost? And it's these things matter. And when we send invoices to customers, we include on how much CO2 was consumed with that, and to really certify and what we've done with that CO2, because we are investing in CO2 products. So basically, they get the service kind of in a climate neutral way. But how much does that matter to a given customer? I think you would probably have to ask the customer. I hope that fast forward 5 years, these things should be equally important, like a quality certification. I hope these things would not be nice to have, but a must-have requirement when regulations catch up. I hope these things would become not a checkbox exercise in many companies saying, do these people have like whatever label for sustainability, and not asking any more questions, but really be very, more demanding in that. I've been actually suggesting most CEOs of our customers go audit us really badly for ESG. Go do it, please, because we love to share. And if you find anything that you find, oh my gosh, why are you doing this? Oh, it's so cool. I mean, we're happy to share. And that maybe links back also to the competitor question. I mean, I'm super happy to share more details on how we do things from a sustainability perspective, because it's everyone's planet, and it's like you don't want to have a patent about what you do to maybe benefit the planet, right? It's about sharing and caring at the end. So long answer to your question about probably market uptake and reception. I would say, in summary, variable, but it shouldn't be the determinant on why we do things the way.
So everyone bears responsibility. Everyone is, in the same industry, and this is not like a selling tool that you say to customers. This is something that's not nice to have. It's genuinely something you're passionate about, and it's not the case where it's used to maybe get 2 more customers. It's really something that's at the core of what you're trying to build. Not only differently, being an agile, small, growing CDMO, but really caring for the environment is at the core of what 1023 really stands for. And like you say, in 5 years from now, the hope and the idea is more people will follow suit, and this is at the top of their priority as well, because as you say, it's everyone's planet.
Absolutely. Thank you for the brilliant summary.
So, can sustainability and commercial success genuinely work together in pharma manufacturing?
Absolutely. There's great research on that, by the way. And the way you can think about it is actually, if you think about sustainability, it could be even quite an operational cost saver. So sustainability is it's not a cost. I mean, generally, it's a mindset, and you could also argue at some level of investment. Simple example, we, for example, built photovoltaics around our whole facility in Viva 2 in Visp, so the new production. The whole facade is really photovoltaic panels, and you could argue, okay, we had to buy them, right? But I mean, just last year we produced over 50 or 60 megatons of megawatt of energy basically there, which we used and also provided to the grid with the money. With what we provided to the grid, we got a little bit of return. With the energy that we're using, we are basically reducing our operational cost. Depending on where energy costs are going, this is providing us quite some operational cushion, if you know that basically you're kind of self-proficient from an energy utilization perspective. So, and it goes alongside with a lot of things you do. Like, for example, if you are thinking about disposables, and you can maybe have a way to reuse materials without any quality impact in the lab. We are Mike Green Lab certified. So thinking about the use time and life cycle of these components, when you target to get less waste, it means you maybe need to procure less materials. So there is a lot of elements of where this plays a lot of benefits from an operational cost perspective. But I know there's a lot of perception across a lot of CEOs out there saying, oh, sustainability is a cost. And it's actually not a cost.
Okay, so that's the mindset that's going to take some time to shift and change. And obviously, this is a growing topic where everyone's talking about it, but not necessarily focusing on it as much as they should. But the hope is a couple of years from now on, it's at the top of the priority. So I'm going to just move the conversation forward here. We discussed a lot about onboarding, hiring earlier during the conversation. So what I understand is 1023 doesn't operate in a traditional hierarchical way. My question on the back of all of that, for people listening and potentially candidates who want to join the business, what do you have to say about this operating model where people don't necessarily have head ofs? They do obviously for guidance and training and all of that, but it's not like a hierarchical way that's traditionally been done.
Yeah, so I mean, I would probably describe it as a distributed hierarchy or functional hierarchy is where got to make sure on who's deciding what. So it's a very conscious thought about where you take decisions, for example, for how do you do performance reviews? How do you do appraisals? How do you do feedbacks when it comes to work? So who's responsible from a technical decision making on how you do, I don't know, how you do cleaning validation, whatever kind of, right? So you have a cleaning validation expert and he or she should be making the decisions for how this is done. And that would be a role and it would be his or her decision. And basically their work, everyone is working in teams where you also have, team leads and stuff, but you want to make sure that there's an element of, distributed responsibility. So the fundamental idea is make decisions by the right people at the right level with the right information, rather than looking into a boss in a pyramid who has every answer for everything, right? And that's where, especially if you're looking at larger organizations, the challenge usually is that the information is getting thinner and thinner. If you escalate it across a level of hierarchies, that the amount of information that a CEO of a 10,000 people company has is probably not going to be very rich. So he or she will have to decide based on very few informations, and naturally a 24-hour day will never be enough. Right? It's just inherent. It's an inherent problem of that. So I think the fundamental idea is you got to make sure that people at the right level take the right decisions. Plus, I think the idea is to make sure that you're not driven by the wrong incentives. So for example, where you say head off. So we, for example, have a policy which basically is not manifesting titles. We don't have these traditional titles in the organization. And I appreciate that for some people, it seems to be very important if they're a VP or a senior VP or a director or a senior director. I would probably say, I have thought about what's important in my life and what I put on my business card. I don't really care. And how does that define you as being a better or worse person? What do people tell about you when you're dead? And do you want to put VP of whatever on your gravestone? I'm not sure that that's going to be the legacy that's going to be there for you. People will remember you for being a good dad, for being mindful, thoughtful. And the question is, who do you want to be in life? And I doubt anyone at the end of the day, when you really think about that, would say, I wanted to have been a senior VP in a CDMO as a life mission. And that's why I do believe that these carrots in some organizations saying, oh, you got to be a senior VP and then you get like 2% salary increase, and you do that by basically checking these 5 boxes. I think the question is, what is really the career ladder? What is a career for you? And really asking these questions, I think is fundamentally strong, because it also helps an individual in the organization to think about what is important for you. What is important for you? Why do you wake up in the morning? What's the impact that you want to make at work? What's the legacy you want to last? And I think it's important to ask these questions in an organization, rather than jumping into the framework of saying, if you're a director, you're a good guy. If you're senior director, you're better. And I've been operating in large traditional organizations where someone with a bigger title than I had wouldn't talk to me. Where when I was a VP and I met a senior VP and he said, I will only talk to your boss because you're only a VP, so I don't want to bother with you. And that's, I think, traits of communication and human behaviors that I'm not very particularly excited about, because at the end of the day, communication shouldn't be determined by by hierarchical titles. It should be basically be driven by the content and the cause, and you want to collaborate and work for a joint cause and a purpose. And that's to me maybe zooming out on what I think purpose of an individual, making sure you help people find their ikigai at the end of the day, what they're good at, what their strengths are, what the world needs, what people are getting paid for, and to provide an organizational framework where people can work according to their strength, bring themselves to work and make an impact, and do what's important for them. And what is that important for them should obviously ideally be having a good overlap with what's important for the company, what's important for the customers, what's important for their patient. And if that really is the case, magic will happen.
Amazing. And like you say, it's the impact you have on people. You work in a space where what you do really matters for patients, first and foremost, but at the same time, the team is such an important part. You spend a lot of your time at work, and everyone has to be on the same, path, on the same sort of working towards the same goal. And so it's not necessarily about the titles, it's how the impact you're having on people around you, and obviously the impacts on patients as well. Okay, from a broader perspective, how are biotech funding pressures changing what customers need from CDMO?
Well, first of all, I do think that biotech funding certainly has been a good topic. I think funding is coming a little bit back in the US. You would probably still argue that there's still a lot of funding pressure. If biotech startups don't get the money, they obviously have less opportunity to drive their projects forward, which will impact their ability to maneuver, speed. So basically, underfunding could basically mean just impact on speed, not being able to deliver, risk of failure. If you are not funding like as a whole, like, I don't know, a portfolio of 10 companies, but only focus on one, it means basically less opportunity from a perspective of being able to deliver something against that kind of goal. So less likelihood of them being successful. From a CDMO perspective, it may mean if you're very depending on that segment of biotechs in that funding stage, it probably means you have a smaller market. It basically means that there's less money to spend. People will think maybe more tightly about how they're going to spend it. Having said that, I think it's not a bad idea, because I think everyone should think about how to spend their money, being company money and investor money as well. Like, this is what I tell my kids. I mean, here's your pocket money, spend it wisely. And, if it's gone, it's gone. But, that's why I do think that it comes back with also a focus and rigor. And obviously, as a CDMO, you got to be mindful about from a dependency perspective from that market segment, and maybe that kind of consideration. For 2023, I'm not necessarily nervous. Frankly saying, we've been growing ever since across different segments, also and customer types, I would probably say. And I'm truly convinced of the value we bring to biotech startups as well. So that's where I think of course, I'm convinced that it's money well spent with ten23. So we've not been very concerned about that from the outset.
Amazing. One last question from my side. Obviously, you guys started in Europe. You've grown into the US. You've just opened an office, in Japan, and you're really scaling. And congratulations on all of the growth, especially in a time where companies are maybe doing the opposite, downsizing and all of that. So congratulations on all of the success you guys are having. What do you want ten23 to be known as in 10 years?
Brilliant question. Thank you. I would love us to be known as the team who's been really providing, solutions for medicines by thinking differently. And I think you used the word outside of the box, but by really tackling things differently, or in a nutshell, in 10 years or 5 years from now, seeing medicines on the market that otherwise wouldn't exist if this organization. I think that would make me very happy. And if we can also motivate other players in the pharma and CDMO space, to think about integrating sustainability into their DNA for whatever reason, and happy to be to anyone being motivated by doing this just because we do that and of the customer perception. If basically that would make me really happy, is that by really adding thoughts to other organizations and maybe impacting their strategy to more sustainability and people focus. That would be
amazing. We wish you the most success. Obviously, we'll follow your journey closely. Thank you so much for doing this. It's been an awesome discussion. I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Leonard. It's been great fun, and yeah, hope to chat again. Thanks for your time.